In a modest single-story home on the outskirts of suburban Portland, Oregon, Emily Carter, a single mother, lived with her 8-year-old daughter, Sophia. The house, painted white with faded trim, sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees, their leaves just beginning to turn in the crisp September air of 2024. Its large living room window offered a view of the neighborhood, where children often rode bikes until dusk. Inside, the home was warm but cluttered, with Sophia's drawings pinned to the fridge and a worn couch bearing the marks of years of use. Emily, a store manager at a local supermarket, had worked long hours for years to provide for her daughter after her husband's death in a car accident 3 years prior. Her shifts often stretched into the evening, leaving Sophia alone for short periods, a routine they had settled into with careful rules. On that fateful Tuesday, Emily had left for work at noon, kissing Sophia goodbye as the girl sat cross-legged on the living room floor, sketching a unicorn with colored pencils. Sophia, mature for her age, knew to lock the door, stay inside, and call her mother or their neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, if anything felt wrong. Emily trusted her daughter's independence, a trait Sophia had developed early, perhaps out of necessity. The day passed uneventfully at the supermarket, though Emily felt a nagging unease she couldn't place, chalking it up to fatigue from a double shift. She promised herself she'd take Sophia for ice cream the next day to make up for her absence. When Emily pulled into the driveway at 9:07 p.m., the house looked unusually still. The porch light, which Sophia always turned on when alone, was off, and the glow from the living room window was absent. Emily's stomach tightened as she stepped out of her car, her keys jangling in her trembling hand. The front door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible through the crack. She pushed it open, calling Sophia's name into the silent house. No answer came. The air inside felt heavy, carrying the faint scent of Sophia's strawberry shampoo mingled with something unfamiliar, like damp earth. Emily flicked on the living room light, her eyes scanning the familiar space. Sophia's tablet lay abandoned on the couch, its screen dark but still warm to the touch, suggesting recent use. A half-finished glass of apple juice sat on the coffee table, condensation pooling around its base. Emily's heart raced as she moved through the house, checking Sophia's bedroom, where stuffed animals sat neatly on the bed, untouched. The kitchen was equally undisturbed, the sink holding only a single plate from Sophia's after-school snack. In the hallway, Emily's breath caught when she spotted Sophia's favorite pink hair clip, adorned with a glittery butterfly, lying near the front door. It was scuffed, as if stepped on, and its presence on the floor felt wrong. Sophia was meticulous about keeping it in her hair or on her nightstand. Panic surged through Emily as she ran outside, her voice hoarse as she shouted Sophia's name into the night. The street was empty, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the breeze. She knocked on Mrs. Henderson's door, hoping the elderly neighbor had seen something, but the woman, roused from sleep, reported nothing unusual. Though she recalled hearing a car engine around 7 p.m., Emily's hands shook as she dialed 911, her voice breaking as she explained that her daughter was gone. Within 30 minutes, 2 police cars arrived, their red and blue lights casting eerie shadows across the house. Officers swept the property, their flashlights cutting through the backyard's overgrown grass, while Emily stood frozen on the porch, clutching Sophia's hair clip. The lead officer, Detective Wilson, a man with graying hair and a calm demeanor, questioned Emily inside. She recounted the day, her words tumbling out in a rush. Leaving for work, Sophia's promise to stay safe, the open door. The officers searched the house again, finding no signs of forced entry or struggle, which only deepened Emily's dread. They bagged the hair clip as evidence, though Detective Wilson cautioned that it might not yield much. Neighbors gathered outside, drawn by the commotion, their whispers adding to the surreal weight of the night. A search party formed, combing the nearby park and wooded trail, but the darkness and lack of leads made progress slow. Emily sat at the kitchen table as the clock ticked past midnight, her phone gripped tightly as she waited for updates. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a hollow shell, every creak of the floorboards amplifying her fear. She stared at a photo of Sophia on the fridge, taken at her last birthday, her gap-toothed smile framed by blonde pigtails. The thought that Sophia might be scared, alone, or worse gnawed at Emily's mind. She replayed the day, questioning her decision to leave her daughter alone, guilt settling like a stone in her chest. Detective Wilson promised to expand the search at dawn, but his measured tone offered little comfort. As the police left, leaving an officer stationed outside, Emily remained awake, her eyes fixed on the front door, willing Sophia to walk through it. The night stretched on, each hour eroding her hope, replaced by a growing certainty that something terrible had stolen her daughter from the safety of their home. The week following Sophia's disappearance stretched into an agonizing blur for Emily Carter. Each dawn brought renewed hope that faded with the setting sun, as search parties scoured the suburban fringes of Portland, Oregon, without uncovering a single trace of the 8-year-old. Volunteers, clad in reflective vests, combed through nearby parks, their footsteps crunching on fallen leaves, while police dogs sniffed along the wooded trails that wound behind the neighborhood. Helicopters buzzed overhead on the second day, their blades slicing through the overcast sky, but by the fourth, their presence dwindled, replaced by somber updates from Detective Wilson. The detective, with his notepad always in hand, visited Emily daily, his questions growing repetitive as leads evaporated. The pink hair clip, the only clue from that night, yielded no fingerprints or DNA, its significance reduced to a haunting reminder of Sophia's absence. Emily's life contracted to the confines of her small home, now a shrine to her missing daughter. She sat for hours at the kitchen table, surrounded by Sophia's drawings and school photos, her fingers tracing the edges of a crayon portrait of a smiling son. The house, once filled with Sophia's giggles during games of hide-and-seek, felt oppressively silent, the ticking of the wall clock a cruel metronome counting the seconds of her absence. Emily's days blended into a cycle of waiting for police updates, answering the same questions from well-meaning neighbors, and staring at her phone, willing it to ring with news. Sleep eluded her, her nights spent pacing the living room, replaying the moment she found the front door ajar. Memories of Sophia hiding behind the couch or squeezing into the hall closet during their games now carried a sinister weight, as if those playful moments had foreshadowed something darker. Amid the fog of grief, Emily began to notice peculiarities in her brother Michael's behavior. Michael, a lanky 35-year-old with a perpetually grease-stained jacket from his job as an auto mechanic, had been a fixture in their lives since her husband's death. He had stepped in to fix leaky faucets, mow the lawn, and drive Sophia to soccer practice when Emily's shifts ran late. His presence had been a comfort, but now it felt intrusive. He appeared at the house daily, bringing casseroles from their mother or offering to handle errands, yet his insistence that Emily stay out of the basement struck her as odd. He claimed recent rains had caused flooding, leaving the space damp and moldy, unfit for her to navigate in her fragile state. Emily, too consumed by worry to argue, had nodded absently, but the excuse lingered in her mind, its logic fraying with each repetition. One afternoon, while Michael was at the house sorting through a stack of mail he'd collected for her, Emily stepped outside to his pickup truck to retrieve a forgotten grocery bag. As she opened the passenger door, her eyes caught on a small plastic container tucked under the seat, an unopened package of industrial-grade construction adhesive. Its label pristine. The discovery puzzled her. Michael hadn't mentioned any home repairs, and the basement, according to him, was too wet for such work. She slipped the container back, her pulse quickening, and returned to the house, her mind wrestling with the implications. Was he fixing something without telling her, or was there another purpose? The thought felt disloyal. Michael had been her rock, the uncle who built Sophia a treehouse last summer, but doubt took root, its tendrils wrapping around her trust. Emily's suspicions deepened during a visit from Detective Wilson later that day. He shared that the police had expanded their investigation, interviewing local shop owners and checking security footage from nearby gas stations. Nothing conclusive had surfaced, but he mentioned offhand that they were looking into recent purchases of unusual items, like heavy-duty locks or building supplies, in case they pointed to a prepared hiding place. The comment, meant as a procedural update, hit Emily like a jolt. She thought of the adhesive in Michael's truck, her stomach twisting as she wondered whether to mention it. Guilt surged. She couldn't accuse her own brother without proof, not after all he'd done. Yet, the image of Sophia's empty bedroom haunted her, urging her to question everything. That evening, alone in the house, Emily wandered into Sophia's room, seeking solace in her daughter's belongings. She opened the drawer of the small desk where Sophia kept her treasures, stickers, a beaded bracelet, a tiny notebook filled with doodles. Flipping through the pages, Emily paused at a drawing of a car, unmistakably Michael's truck, with a stick figure Sophia waving beside it. Below, in her daughter's uneven scrawl, were the words, "Uncle Mike's secret." The phrase sent a chill through Emily, her breath catching as she stared at the innocent sketch. Had Sophia noticed something strange? The notebook offered no further clues, but it fueled Emily's unease, her mind racing to connect the adhesive, Michael's basement warnings, and now this cryptic note. As night fell, Emily sat in the darkened living room, the glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the walls. She clutched Sophia's notebook, her thoughts a tangle of fear and suspicion. Michael's overprotectiveness, once a source of gratitude, now seemed calculated, his frequent visits less about support and more about keeping watch. She recalled how he'd lingered near the basement door during his last visit, his hand resting on the knob as if guarding it. The rational part of her mind pleaded for caution. Michael loved Sophia, had carried her on his shoulders at the county fair, taught her to change a tire on her toy bike. But the mother in her, desperate for answers, couldn't ignore the signs. She resolved to investigate the basement herself, despite Michael's warnings, driven by a growing certainty that the key to Sophia's disappearance lay closer to home than anyone had realized. Emily's resolve to uncover the truth about Sophia's disappearance hardened as she sat in the dim living room, Sophia's notebook still clutched in her hands. The cryptic words, "Uncle Mike's secret," echoed in her mind, intertwining with the image of the construction adhesive in Michael's truck and his insistence that she avoid the basement. The house, bathed in the quiet of midnight, seemed to hold its breath as Emily stood, her decision made. She would investigate the basement, no matter what Michael had warned. The memory of Sophia's voice, bright and curious, mentioning that her uncle was fixing something down there years ago, surfaced unbidden. At the time, Emily had dismissed it as childish chatter, but now it felt like a breadcrumb leading to a truth she dreaded to face. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, its beam cutting through the darkness as she approached the basement door. The door creaked as Emily opened it, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent house. The air that wafted up was cool and musty, carrying the faint tang of mildew. The wooden stairs descended into shadow, their edges worn from years of use. Emily's heart pounded as she stepped down, the flashlight's light bouncing with each careful movement. The basement was a cluttered maze of forgotten relics, cardboard boxes sagging with old clothes, a broken rocking chair, and stacks of magazines her late husband had never thrown out. Cobwebs draped the low ceiling, brushing against her hair as she navigated the narrow path. The concrete floor was cold beneath her slippers, coated in a fine layer of dust that swirled with her steps, except for one corner where the surface gleamed unnaturally clean. There, a patch of fresh cement, roughly 3 feet square, stood out against the cracked, weathered floor. Its smooth texture and slightly darker hue suggested recent work, out of place in a space untouched for years. Emily's breath hitched as she knelt beside it, her fingers tracing the edges where the new cement met the old, finding no cracks or signs of wear. The discovery sent a shiver through her, her mind racing to explain why Michael would pour cement in a supposedly flooded basement. She recalled his evasiveness when she'd asked about the space, his quick dismissal of her offer to help clean it. Setting the flashlight on a nearby box, Emily began searching the basement for clues, her hands sifting through the clutter. She moved aside a pile of warped photo albums, their pages stuck together from dampness, and uncovered a small metal lockbox tucked behind a rusted bicycle. The box was heavy, its surface scratched but intact, and bore no label. Emily's fingers fumbled with the latch, but it was locked, and no key was in sight. Frustration gnawed at her, but she set the box aside, determined to focus on the cement patch. As she turned back, her foot nudged a cardboard box labeled Mike's Stuff and faded marker, its flaps loosely folded. Curiosity and dread compelled Emily to open the box, revealing a jumble of old tools, car magazines, and a worn leather journal, its cover cracked with age. She recognized it as Michael's from their teenage years, a relic from when he lived with their parents before moving out. Sitting cross-legged on the cold floor, Emily opened the journal, the flashlight balanced on her knee. The pages were filled with Michael's tight, angular handwriting, chronicling his frustrations as a young adult. Entries from a decade ago detailed his resentment toward Emily's late husband, Tom, whom he blamed for overshadowing him in their family's eyes. Michael wrote of Tom's success as a contractor, his stable marriage, and his role as Sophia's father with a bitterness that grew sharper with each page. Emily's stomach churned as she read, the words painting a picture of a man consumed by envy, his sense of inadequacy festering over years. The journal took a darker turn in entries dated after Tom's death. Michael described Sophia as the only light left, calling her "my little star" in passages that lingered on her laughter and the way she hugged him during visits. The affection, once innocent, now read as obsessive, his words fixating on moments spent alone with her, teaching her to ride a bike, reading her bedtime stories when Emily worked late. One entry, written a year ago, sent ice through Emily's veins. "She's better off with me. I can keep her safe, away from all this chaos." The flashlight trembled in her hand as she closed the journal, her mind reeling. The implications were too horrific to fully process, but the pieces, Michael's secrecy, the cement, the journal formed a chilling pattern. She knew, with a mother's certainty, that her brother was tied to Sophia's disappearance. Emily returned to the cement patch, her fear giving way to a fierce determination. The journal had confirmed her suspicions, but she needed tangible evidence to find Sophia. She scanned the basement for tools, her eyes landing on a rusty crowbar leaning against a shelf. Gripping it, she tested the cement's edge, finding it solid but not impenetrable. The thought of what might lie beneath drove her forward, though her hands shook with the weight of what she might uncover. She considered calling Detective Wilson but hesitated, afraid that without proof, her accusations against Michael would be dismissed as paranoia. The basement's silence pressed against her, broken only by the faint hum of the water heater in the corner. Emily knelt beside the cement, the crowbar heavy in her hands, her resolve steeled by the image of Sophia's smile. Whatever Michael was hiding, she would find it, driven by a love that outweighed her terror of the truth. Emily's hands still trembled from the revelations in Michael's journal as she stood in the basement, the crowbar now a lifeline to uncovering the truth about Sophia. The cement patch, its edges rough under her fingertips, loomed as both a barrier and a gateway to her daughter's fate. She waited until the following night, when Michael had left for a supposed late shift at the auto shop, his truck's taillights fading down the quiet street. The house was silent, the clock in the kitchen ticking past 11 p.m. as Emily gathered tools, a crowbar, a hammer, and the flashlight, her movements deliberate despite the fear gnawing at her core. She descended the basement stairs, the air growing colder and heavier with each step, the musty scent now laced with the sharp tang of her own sweat. The flashlight's beam swept across the cluttered space, settling on the cement patch that had haunted her thoughts since its discovery. Kneeling beside the patch, Emily wedged the crowbar's tip into a seam where the new cement met the old floor, her muscles straining as she applied pressure. The cement resisted, its surface unyielding, but she hammered the crowbar's end, the metallic clangs echoing in the confined space. She paused frequently, her ears straining for any sound from above, terrified that Michael might return early. After nearly an hour of grueling effort, a crack splintered across the cement, and with a final heave, the slab broke apart, revealing a wooden panel beneath. Emily's breath caught as she brushed away debris, exposing a rectangular board with concealed hinges and a small metal latch. The panel was expertly crafted, its edges stained to blend with the surrounding floor, invisible unless sought. Her pulse thundered as she pried the latch open, the panel lifting with a soft groan to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The flashlight's beam pierced the void, illuminating rough wooden steps that spiraled into a hidden chamber. Emily hesitated, her body frozen by the weight of what she might find. But the thought of Sophia, her smile, her voice, propelled her forward. She descended carefully, the stairs creaking under her weight, the air growing damp and stale. At the bottom, the chamber opened into a cramped space, no larger than a small bedroom, its walls lined with unfinished plywood. The flashlight revealed a thin mattress pressed against one wall, its surface covered with a faded quilt Emily recognized from her attic. Beside it sat a cardboard box containing granola bars, bottled water, and a few canned goods, their labels pristine as if recently purchased. A stack of children's books, their covers worn, lay neatly arranged on the floor, titles Sophia loved, stories about unicorns and brave adventurers. Emily's knees buckled as her light fell on a drawing taped to the plywood wall. A vibrant unicorn, its mane a swirl of pink and purple, unmistakably Sophia's work. The colored pencils used were the same ones Emily had bought for her daughter's last birthday, their tips dulled from use. Tears blurred her vision as she touched the paper, her fingers tracing the familiar lines of Sophia's art. The room was a twisted mockery of care, a prison disguised as a sanctuary. Her gaze darted around, searching for Sophia, but the chamber was empty, its silence deafening. Panic surged, but Emily forced herself to focus, sweeping the flashlight across every corner. In the far end, tucked beneath the mattress, she spotted a folded piece of paper. Her hand shook as she retrieved it, unfolding it to reveal Sophia's childish handwriting. "Uncle Mike says Mommy will come when she's ready." The words, scrawled in blue crayon, confirmed Emily's worst fears. Michael had manipulated Sophia, convincing her to stay hidden, perhaps under the guise of protecting her mother. The note crumpled in Emily's fist as rage and despair collided within her. Sophia had been here, under her own home, while Emily grieved and searched miles away. The realization that Michael had orchestrated this, keeping her daughter captive in a secret built with meticulous cruelty, made her stomach churn. She scanned the room again, noting details she'd missed: a small battery-powered lamp, its bulb dim but functional, a plastic bucket in the corner, its purpose grimly clear, and a ventilation grate in the ceiling, its faint hum suggesting a system designed to sustain life in this hidden cell. The craftsmanship was chilling, evidence of planning that stretched back months, perhaps longer. Emily's mind raced. Where was Sophia now? Had Michael moved her, sensing the net closing in? The empty room suggested he'd anticipated discovery, but the fresh supplies indicated recent activity. Emily climbed back up the stairs, her legs unsteady, the flashlight clutched tightly as she emerged into the basement. She stood beside the open hatch, her breath ragged, grappling with the urge to call the police immediately. But fear that Michael might harm Sophia if cornered held her back. She needed more evidence, something to ensure he couldn't slip away. The lockbox she'd found earlier beckoned, its contents still a mystery. She retrieved it, setting it on a nearby crate, and attacked the lock with the crowbar, the metal screeching as it gave way. Inside, she found a bundle of receipts, purchases for plywood, insulation, and a portable air filter, all dated months before Sophia's disappearance. Tucked among them was a small photo of Sophia, taken at a park, her face unaware of the camera. The image, creased from handling, deepened Emily's horror, a tangible link to Michael's obsession. Time was slipping away. Emily pocketed the photo and note, her mind calculating her next move. She needed to find Sophia before Michael returned, but the empty chamber suggested he'd already taken her elsewhere. The basement, with its secrets now exposed, felt like a trap, its shadows closing in. Emily's resolve hardened. She would confront Michael, but first, she had to ensure Sophia's safety. The flashlight's beam flickered, its battery waning, but Emily's determination burned brighter, fueled by a mother's love and the desperate need to bring her daughter home. Emily's heart pounded as she stood in the basement, the crumpled note from Sophia and the incriminating photo clutched in her hand, her mind racing with the urgency of her discovery. She had dialed Detective Wilson's number, her voice shaking as she described the hidden chamber and its chilling contents, urging him to send officers immediately. He promised a team would arrive within 20 minutes, but the ticking clock felt like a countdown to Michael's return. Emily knew her brother's habits. His late shifts at the auto shop rarely ended before midnight, but his unpredictable visits to the house made time a luxury she didn't have. The basement's oppressive silence pressed against her, the open hatchet gaping wound in the floor, but she couldn't stay still. Sophia wasn't in the chamber, and the fresh supplies suggested Michael had moved her recently, perhaps to another hiding place. Driven by a mother's instinct, Emily scanned the basement for any clue to her daughter's whereabouts, her flashlight sweeping across the cluttered space. Her eyes caught on faint tire marks etched into the dust near the basement's rear exit, a narrow door leading to the backyard. The marks were fresh, their edges sharp, as if a vehicle had backed up recently. Emily followed them, pushing through the door into the cool night air, the flashlight revealing a trail that curved toward the detached garage at the edge of the property. The garage, rarely used since her husband's death, was Michael's domain, where he stored tools and occasionally worked on his truck. Her pulse quickened as she approached, the tire marks growing clearer in the gravel. The garage door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness within. Emily slipped inside, her footsteps muffled on the concrete floor, the air thick with the scent of motor oil and sawdust. The flashlight's beam danced across shelves of wrenches, paint cans, and a tarp-covered pile in the corner, but her attention locked on a large wooden crate against the far wall. Its lid secured with a heavy padlock. Beside the crate lay a duffel bag, its zipper half open, revealing a glimpse of fabric Emily recognized instantly. Sophia's favorite blue sweater, the one she'd worn the day she vanished. Her breath caught, her hands trembling as she knelt to inspect the bag, finding more of Sophia's clothes folded neatly inside, as if prepared for a trip. The crate loomed beside her, its presence ominous, its lock gleaming under the flashlight's light. Emily's mind screamed that Sophia was inside, but fear of what she might find paralyzed her for a moment. She searched the shelves for something to break the lock, her hands closing around a heavy steel pipe, its weight reassuring in her grip. Before she could act, the low rumble of an engine broke the night silence, headlights slicing through the garage's small window as Michael's truck pulled into the driveway. Panic surged, but Emily ducked behind a stack of crates, extinguishing her flashlight, her body pressed against the cold wood as she steadied her breathing. The truck's engine cut off, followed by the crunch of boots on gravel. Michael entered the garage, his silhouette framed in the doorway, a large canvas bag slung over his shoulder. He moved with purpose, unaware of Emily's presence, and set the bag down beside the crate, fishing a key from his pocket. His movements were hurried, his shoulders tense, as if anticipating interruption. Emily's grip tightened on the pipe, her muscles coiled as she watched him unlock the crate, the padlock clattering to the floor. The lid creaked as he lifted it, revealing a dark interior, but before he could reach inside, Emily sprang forward, driven by a surge of maternal fury. She swung the pipe, aiming not for Michael but for the crate's edge, the metal striking wood with a resounding crack that echoed in the confined space. The impact startled Michael, his body jerking as he spun to face her, his face contorting into a mask of rage, his eyes wild with recognition. Michael lunged, his hands outstretched, but Emily sidestepped, her instincts sharpened by desperation. She swung the pipe again, catching his arm, the force sending him stumbling against a shelf, tools clattering to the floor. The crate rocked from the commotion, and a faint movement within caught Emily's eye. Her heart leapt as Sophia's pale face emerged, her small body scrambling out, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She was thinner, her blonde hair tangled, but alive, her presence a miracle Emily could scarcely process. Michael recovered, his gaze locking on Sophia, and he lunged toward her, his intent clear. Emily reacted instantly, throwing herself between them, the pipe raised as a shield. She swung with all her strength, the metal connecting with Michael's shoulder, a sickening thud that sent him crashing to his knees, pain twisting his features. Sophia whimpered, cowering behind the crate, but Emily held her ground, the pipe trembling in her hands as Michael struggled to rise. His eyes burned with a mix of anger and betrayal, his breath ragged as he reached for a wrench on the floor. Before he could strike, the garage door burst open, floodlights piercing the darkness as police officers stormed in, their boots pounding the concrete. Detective Wilson led the charge, his service weapon drawn, his voice cutting through the chaos as he ordered Michael to the ground. Michael froze, his hands still clutching the wrench, but the sight of multiple officers, their flashlights trained on him, drained the fight from his body. He dropped the tool, his shoulders slumping as he complied, lying face down as officers cuffed his wrists, the metallic click of handcuffs punctuating the moment. Emily dropped the pipe, her strength dissolving as she rushed to Sophia, falling to her knees beside her daughter. She pulled Sophia into her arms, the girl's small frame trembling against her, her skin cool and smelling of dust and confinement. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she held her, the reality of Sophia's survival overwhelming her senses. The garage buzzed with activity, officers securing Michael, radios crackling with updates, but Emily saw only her daughter, her hands smoothing Sophia's hair, her heart aching at the fragility beneath her touch. The nightmare wasn't over, but Sophia was here, alive, and Emily clung to that truth as the police led Michael away, his silhouette disappearing into the night, leaving mother and daughter entwined in the chaos of their reunion. The ambulance's red and blue lights faded into the distance as it carried Sophia to the hospital, Emily seated beside her daughter, her hand gently clasping Sophia's small, cold fingers. The sterile interior of the vehicle hummed with the soft beeping of medical equipment, a stark contrast to the chaos of the garage where Emily had found her daughter moments ago. Sophia, wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, lay on the stretcher, her eyes fluttering shut from exhaustion, her pale face illuminated by the ambulance's overhead lights. Emily's heart ached at the sight of her daughter's frailty, the once vibrant girl reduced to a shadow of herself after weeks of captivity. She brushed a strand of tangled blonde hair from Sophia's forehead, her touch tentative, as if afraid her daughter might dissolve under her fingers. The paramedics worked quietly, checking Sophia's vitals, their movements efficient but gentle, aware of the delicate reunion unfolding before them. At the hospital, a team of doctors and nurses whisked Sophia into an examination room, their white coats a blur as Emily followed, her steps unsteady from adrenaline and relief. The attending physician, Dr. Elena Martinez, conducted a thorough assessment, her hands steady as she checked Sophia's pulse and examined her for injuries. Emily stood by the bed, her eyes never leaving her daughter, who stirred occasionally, her expression a mix of confusion and fatigue. Dr. Martinez noted Sophia's significant weight loss, nearly 10% of her body mass, and signs of dehydration, though no serious physical injuries were evident. The psychological toll, however, was clear in Sophia's withdrawn demeanor, her eyes darting nervously when a nurse approached with a stethoscope. The doctor recommended immediate hydration therapy and a consultation with a pediatric trauma specialist, emphasizing the need for long-term care to address the emotional scars of her ordeal. Emily nodded, her mind overwhelmed but resolute, determined to provide whatever Sophia needed to heal. The hospital room, with its pale blue walls and antiseptic scent, became a temporary sanctuary. Sophia slept fitfully in the adjustable bed, and 4-line taped to her arm, delivering fluids to restore her strength. Emily sat in a vinyl chair beside her, her body aching from the night's events but unwilling to rest. She watched the rise and fall of Sophia's chest, each breath a reassurance that her daughter was truly here. The police had taken Michael into custody, and Detective Wilson had called to confirm that a search of his truck and apartment was underway, uncovering further evidence of his meticulous planning. The hidden chamber in the basement, built over months with materials disguised as routine purchases, had been designed to keep Sophia concealed indefinitely, a revelation that chilled Emily to her core. Michael's motives, rooted in a warped sense of possession and resentment toward Emily's life, were beginning to unravel, but the full truth would take time to emerge. Guilt gnawed at Emily as she sat vigil, her mind replaying the weeks she'd trusted Michael, blind to his darkness. She blamed herself for not questioning his behavior sooner, for leaving Sophia alone that fateful day, for failing to see the signs in his overbearing presence. The weight of her perceived failures threatened to crush her, but a hospital social worker, a kind woman named Sarah, offered gentle reassurance during a brief visit. Sarah spoke of the strength it took to uncover Sophia's hiding place, urging Emily to focus on the present and her daughter's recovery. Neighbors, too, rallied around them, dropping off flowers and handwritten notes that piled up on the hospital room's windowsill. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman next door, sent a stuffed unicorn, its plush for a comfort Sophia clutched when she woke, a small spark of her old self flickering in her eyes. Sophia's first therapy session took place the following morning, conducted by Dr. Rachel Levine, a pediatric trauma specialist with a warm demeanor that eased Sophia's tension. Emily sat outside the room, her hands clasped tightly, listening to the muffled hum of Dr. Levine's voice through the door. The session was brief, designed to build trust, but Dr. Levine later explained that Sophia's confusion stemmed from Michael's manipulation. She believed she'd been kept in the basement to help Mommy rest. The lie, woven with care, had kept Sophia compliant, a fact that deepened Emily's rage toward her brother. Dr. Levine outlined a plan for ongoing therapy, emphasizing Sophia's resilience and the importance of a stable environment. Emily absorbed the advice, her determination growing to rebuild a life where Sophia could feel safe again. Days passed in the hospital, each one marked by small victories. Sophia began eating soft foods, her appetite returning in tentative bites, and she smiled faintly when a nurse brought coloring books, her fingers tracing familiar patterns of unicorns and stars. Emily remained by her side, sleeping in the chair despite the nurse's offers of a cot, her fear of leaving Sophia even for a moment rooted in the terror of her disappearance. The hospital's routine, vital checks, quiet footsteps in the corridor, became a backdrop to their slow reconnection. Emily brought Sophia's favorite pajamas from home, the ones with rainbow stripes, and helped her change, the act a quiet ritual of care. They colored together during the afternoons, Sophia's drawings growing brighter, a sign of healing Emily clung to like a lifeline. The decision to sell the house came on the third day, born from a sleepless night as Emily stared at the hospital ceiling. The home, tainted by Michael's betrayal and the hidden chamber, could no longer be a place of refuge. She contacted a realtor, her voice steady as she outlined plans to relocate to a small town an hour away, where Sophia could attend a new school and they could start fresh. The thought of leaving Portland was daunting, but the promise of a new beginning outweighed the pain of letting go. Emily envisioned a house with wide windows and a garden, a space where Sophia could play without fear, where the shadows of the past wouldn't linger. Discharge came on the fifth day, Sophia's strength sufficiently restored for outpatient care. Emily packed their belongings, her hands lingering on the stuffed unicorn, now a talisman of their survival. The drive home was temporary. They stayed with Mrs. Henderson until the house sold, but Emily felt a flicker of hope as Sophia gazed out the car window, pointing at a flock of birds. Back at the neighbors, they resumed their coloring ritual, unicorns taking shape on fresh pages, each stroke a step toward reclaiming joy. Emily watched her daughter, her heart swelling with a love that had carried them through the darkest nights. The road ahead would be long, marked by therapy and the shadow of Michael's actions. But they were together, their bond unbreakable, a foundation for the life they would build anew.